Welcome to the London Property Podcast, your trusted guide through the complex and ever-evolving world of London real estate. We help clients manage, protect, and grow their property wealth by connecting them with the right expertise from finance, law, and tax to construction, design, and strategic advice. Through conversations with industry leaders, we bring you clear, practical insight into the trends, challenges, and opportunities shaping the market. Let's dive in.
Welcome to London Property. I'm your host, Farnaz Fazaipour, and today we're delighted to welcome back to the show Nicholas Boyarsky, who's an outstanding architect. I would call an academic as well. So we're really delighted that you've given us the time today. Thank you for coming back.
Always a pleasure to come and
Thank you.
help.
Thank you. We wanted to talk to you today about the building regulations. And I know that it's a very complex area and it's affecting a lot of different things in property, from how building managers are dealing with service charges, the extra costs of that, the conveyancing when people are buying and selling. So I'm going to ask you, first of all, to just talk to us about building regulations and what the general public could take away from what you can share with us.
Yeah, I mean, when you engage with the builder or an architect and the builder, you have a contract, the builder starts working, but the builder has an obligation to bring in building control. This can either be a local authority or private, and they come and inspect the work at key moments in the project, for instance, when foundations are being built, when steel work's being put in, and they're particularly interested in fire safety and also kind of ecological sustainable measures. So it's very much in the interest of a property owner or somebody undertaking a project to engage with us, because it's a third party, as it were, who's making sure that the work's being carried out according to building regulations.
And then building regulations as a subject has gone through a massive overhaul at the moment after Grenfell, and all sorts of things have been added and who's responsible and so on. So can you just tell us broadly, what are those changes that have impacted
this
the
is
market?
a sort of outcome of Grenfell Tower, which, I mean, that tragedy was partly to do with building regs, partly to do with sort of corruption of builders, and so it's a complex story. But as is often the case in this country, the pendulum swings the other way. And after a number of years, the whole system's been changed, particularly for what's called a high-risk building, which is a building that's either 7 stories tall or over 18 meters high. And there's a new body called the Building Safety Regulator that regulates work at this scale. Projects below that, it's more or less business as normal, in my experience in projects we're doing at the moment. So if you have a property that's lower than 18 meters, there's not much change, actually. So where it comes into is the tall buildings, and you'll find across like central London, a lot of the terrace houses end up having loft spaces or mezzanines at the top. So they all fall into this category.
And what are the extra measures? I mean, I know that it's quite a complex and detailed scenario, but broadly speaking, again, for the sort of general public, what are the main differences?
There are 2 things. I mean, one is actually carrying out the building project, in that you have to submit absolutely everything in advance. And that causes incredible delays. And that's why we're seeing like developers and, property owners are really, the whole process is slowed down. And if you want to make a change during the course of the building works, you then have to sort of stop the work and make an application for change. So that's really dramatic in its effect. And I've heard of colleagues who've started a project on site and then they've had to have a change, so they've had to sort of stop the project. And that, of course, is immensely expensive, because you have a builder with a contract, and if there are delays, then they have the right to claim preliminaries and loss of expense. So it's kind of clogged up the works a lot, and it's also slowed down starts of new projects.
So in my experience with building projects, I mean, in an ideal world, you want to strip back to the bare bones so that there are no surprises, but that's not always practical when you're also trying not to create waste, right?
Yeah.
So in order to submit absolutely everything at the start, you also have to control the clients, because there's always feature creep as well.
It's not really realistic. And I mean, I think there's a teething problem issue, but it's I mean, the system up to now and buildings that aren't high risk are that, you start on site, you make your work, you call in a private inspector or the district surveyor, and they come and look at things, and decisions are made informally on site. That's the way it works. So if there's a problem with the foundation, the person will visit and say, okay, let's do this, and he'll write a note, and you carry on business as normal.
So they're going to have to, I guess, as you said, the teething problems with all these changes in regulation, once it actually comes to market, then the practicalities have to be addressed, and there's going to have to be some tweaks, because
it's going to have to be. And I think there's a lot of talk about, well, some politicians are saying it's completely ridiculous, and I think they might even be, making that part of their policy to kind of roll back this, because it's just not feasible. At the same time, the government's saying they want to build millions of new housing projects.
Yeah, and don't start me off on politicians, because it's coming up in all of my talks, because they keep making these great statements, thinking in 4-year terms, whereas, we're thinking in decades, and the two are just not aligned.
It's a sort of gap in it's an idea, building regulations are idealistic in the sense that they want everybody to build the best, and they're usually triggered by disasters like fires or things like that. So it is idealistic in that sense, but the reality gap is huge in the current system. You see what I mean?
And would you say that that's what's impacting these service charges being so much higher now? Because you've got to check on so many other things.
It puts a lot more onus on the property owner, on the consultants working, and also the managers of the property, the building managers. It just puts a huge onus on everything.
And that's why we keep hearing about service charges being so much higher than they used to be.
I know from recent experience, all the fire doors on a whole building having to be upgraded, having been done a few years before, but it's just onerous.
And also the building safety regulators have changed kind of who's responsible for what, haven't they? They're putting a lot at the door of the architect.
Yes.
So can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I mean, personally, having encountered this, we've decided not to work on high-risk buildings anymore, because it's we have 20, 30 years of experience of working with buildings, and we don't need this kind of intervention. And I know a lot of contractors are really wary of it at the moment too.
And the regulation basically says that whatever happens in a build project, it's the architect that's responsible.
Yeah, yes.
Effectively.
Yes.
And then the architect can't really pass on the responsibility by contract to the individual specialists.
I mean, we haven't had that experience, so I don't know. But there, the contractual structure between the client, the consultants, and the architect, and the builder is very clear, and I don't see how this can overrule that, actually.
Right.
But again, I think it's something that hasn't been, until it's tested in law.
Yeah, where a lot of times that happens, doesn't it?
You're listening to the London Property Podcast. We help clients manage, protect, and grow their property wealth. If you find this conversation useful, don't hesitate to get in touch. Now, back to the conversation.
So as a owner of, I guess, a flat, because you're not going to have too many houses that are 18 meters high. So as owners of flats, what do we need to be aware of? Is there anything that's a red flag when you're about to take your property to market? What are the sort of things?
Take it to market, but if you intend to do any work, you will then have to deal with the Building Safety Regulator. And if there are aspects in your flat, apartment, which aren't up to code, you'll have to bring them up to code. So it's kind of like opening a can of worms.
So let's say you're taking your property to market and you want to make sure that all your paperwork is in order, that lawyers...
I see. I thought, I'm not sure, but I don't think they're checking that. I think if you take a property to market, it goes to market. That's what I understand. But
so it's not retrospective, like, oh, well, hold on a minute. Before you sell it to the next person.
I haven't had that.
We haven't had that yet.
No.
But
I don't think that's feasible.
Yeah.
I really don't think it's feasible, because that would entail bringing experts in and people crawling over the flat and saying, this isn't right, this isn't right.
No.
I think that would completely jam the property
system.
market. Totally.
And then who are these regulators? Do they all sit council by council, or?
Yeah, what it seems to be is there's a board of regulators, and when you submit material to them, they farm it out to
Regional people.
different regions. So, for instance, if you're looking at a listed building in the middle of Chelsea, the material that you submit might be looked at somebody in Lanarkshire or something, So, and it's I don't think that's ideal at all, because hitherto you had people who know the area and the region, the type of architecture, and they can actually make informed judgments on it. So again, it's a sort of bureaucratization of the system, which.
Well, ticking one box in the sense that we're doing something about it, but then unticking a whole load of other boxes that, have to be really tried and tested to see what's practical and what's not practical, it sounds like.
Yes.
Good decision, I guess, then not to do high-rise buildings from your perspective.
Well,
because
a lot of colleagues are saying that, just because it's uncertainty, and also, you're going to have disappointed clients, because so much of this is not known. I mean, the other problem that happened, and we were caught out on this really badly on our recent project, is, the tendency's been to work with approved inspectors over the last 20, 30 years, who are private building control officers, rather than the local authority, for obvious reasons, because, they're more proactive and you're not caught with local authority kind of mindset. But many of them have gone into liquidation recently because of this transition to Building Safety Regulator, because a lot of them weren't approved. They all had to resubmit to be approved inspectors under the new regime, and a lot of them weren't fit to do it, or whatever happens, they couldn't pass the necessary kind of tests. So they've gone into liquidation. So that's why the BSR has a huge backlog of transitional cases that it's still trying to deal with, that they've inherited.
Right. Sounds like the BSR need to have a training program for existing regulators to become new regulators.
I think they did implement it, but obviously there wasn't enough time for it to carry through. And I've heard of at least 3 major approved inspector companies going bust recently. So.
Wow. And then they'll have projects that are in the middle of being done.
Yeah, and they'll have 20, 30,000 projects, for example. The one that we worked with had that many projects. And that's all got to be dealt with by the Building Safety Regulator takes it on, if they're high-risk buildings.
So then they've got to find the talent that hasn't been trained in order to finish the projects that were abandoned because people have gone into liquidation.
Yeah.
Jesus, that's
it's a mess. It has been a mess, and I mean, one can only hope they get their act together and sort it out.
Wow. Okay. And the practical things that have trickled down to the everyday man is really the fire regulation part, isn't it? It's like changing the doors and making sure your cupboards are fireproof.
And maybe, I think in a way that's a good thing, post Grenfell, but that's the biggest implication.
The impact on the market from your perspective is obvious from what you're saying. And I guess that's almost a deadlock for the rest of the market, because if you're trying to invest, build, fix, then your expenses have gone even higher than they had done after COVID. Now you haven't even got the professionals to help you get it through. So going back to the 1.5 million homes that the government wants. So apart from...
Well, those are new builds. But
so the new builds will be easier because you're kind of ticking the boxes.
Although I have heard that, developers are really frustrated by the slow time in response from the Building Safety Regulator. Because when you get to a different scale, it all has to go through the Building Safety Regulator. So I mean, the days of somebody buying a beautiful flat, maybe as an investment for their children in the future, and wanting to update it, modernize it, and then rent it out, say, for 10 years before their kids want it or something, that's just got more complex, I think.
And if you have a flat within a building that's a high-risk building, then that falls under the regulation as well. So it's not just like you're doing the outside, you're doing the roof or whatever.
No, I mean, if you have a ground floor flat in a high-risk building, the same regulations apply to the ground floor.
And I guess we haven't gotten as far into the detail to know whether heritage buildings, listed buildings, and those kind of things will be partly exempt because of their historical
Well, from our
protection.
experience, there's always been a friction between building regulations and listed building concerns. And normally, that's resolved, negotiated on site. And this is the project I was talking about. We made a lot of agreements because we had to, because of the historic fabric, we had to follow certain routes in consultation with the approved inspector. But, building safety regulators are taking a harder line on that, as far as I can see.
A lot of unknowns causing a lot of regulation that can't be implemented, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So in the future, once this is all settled, what would you say would be the ideal way forward?
I personally think the building safety regulation, they have to step back from where they are now, and they have to be more, respectful of the situation of the projects that people are working with. You can come up with an abstract idea of something, and maybe they probably got to the high risk building by looking at tower blocks that are being built, right, like ground floor type. But when you look at an 19th century terrace house in central London, it doesn't fit. They're anachronisms, and
so they almost need to have a committee where they're looking at each case by case, and then making the safety decisions that apply in that scenario.
In our discussions with them, they are understanding. They know about this. They are understanding. They're humans, and there are in many cases quite experienced, approved inspectors, formerly, or engineers. They are aware of this, but they're tasked with implementing this big shift of policy. So I think I've understood that they're prepared to negotiate and be reasonable, but they're still,
their hands are tied as well.
Their hands are tied.
So it's not like they can just say, okay, well, we're going to make an exception here because of this and that and the other. They've got really tight guidelines that need to be challenged in court. Wow. So that could explain the effect it's had on the cost of flats. Because you read all the time in the market that, flats and houses are sort of competing for the stage at the moment. And a lot of complications, not just the leasehold reform, but obviously we've got all of this now and the cost of service charges and so on.
It's a perfect storm,
in every sense. My goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's a buying opportunity, sounds like. So what, I don't even know what we could advise people at the moment.
I think first off, be very careful if you're buying a property or you're living in a property you think you're selling, to establish whether it is a high-risk building or not. If it is, I think you then should take some form of advice about
what's involved
before you embark on the project, I would say.
And as a sort of final question to you, the regulators that were and the regulators that have to become, that learning curve, is it quite huge? I mean, what do people within the industry have to do to get themselves up to speed? Is it just to understand?
I don't know. I mean, I can only talk about the experience of this one large company, and they had to retrain their officers, their building control officers, but for whatever reason, they didn't pass the necessary standards and tests.
So before we thank you for your time and hopefully have this conversation in years to come and in a more positive light, is there any light at the end of the tunnel that we could kind of share with our listeners?
Well, yes, I think I'm describing a messy transitional phase, but I think probably in the long run, everybody's going to be safer, particularly if you live in a tall building. I think that, the retrospective things that are coming in are going to make life safer for people, which I think is a real win.
Yeah.
I mean, the Grenfell was so shocking and it should never happen again. And this is, maybe it's overextending its reach at the moment, but I think in the long term, there are huge benefits for society and everybody.
Once it settles. And I suppose that the material is going to evolve, the material that people use in buildings, that's going to make some of these risks less of a risk as we kind of technologically improve in the way that we build the buildings.
Yes, to some extent, although I think it's more, there's a basic line that building regs sort of bring in, which is it safe? And I think the main things are really the fire.
That's the main
thing. So if you're in a penthouse on the top of a wonderful block of flats and there's a fire, you can get out safely. And I think that's probably the most important thing. It is a pain I think the problem is because we're in central London, we're not, outside of London, and listed buildings in particular are complex, but they always have been complex. And, the whole, listed building thing is a bit of a minefield as well. So I think it's just another obstacle to negotiate.
Yeah, I think the blanket approach that it applies to everything is what needs to change, because obviously it's not a blanket approach. The same way that our leases are not a blanket, the same way that, servicing, building, everything is not blanket. So there needs to be some non-negotiables, I guess, and then more flexibility around it. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, and we will have a more positive conversation about something great next time.
Okay. Anytime. Thank you.
Lovely to have you. Thank you very much. If you do need help in navigating this complex subject, then obviously do please get in touch with us. And we have professionals who can guide you in the right direction for your project and get you ready for the market.
Thanks for listening to the London Property Podcast. If you'd like guidance on managing, protecting, or growing your property wealth, get in touch. We're here to help. And if this episode proved valuable, share it with someone who takes the market seriously and make sure you're following so you never miss an update.